Hey, thanks for tuning in. Bistek is Filipino steak and onions, and it was another one of my favorite things to eat when I was a kid. On the surface, it's pure simplicity to make. It's just slices of beef, soy sauce, onions, and calamansi juice. Calamansi is a fruit native to Southeast Asia that looks a lot like a lime, but is simultaneously more sour and more sweet. It's hard to explain. As you can see from the photos, despite its simplicity, there's a lot of ways to prepare and present bistek. Today, I'm going to do it my way. And my way starts with this: about a pound of flank steak. You can use another cut if you like, such as sirloin, but for my way, I'm going to flank. And I keep saying my way, by the way, because this recipe doesn't come from my mother. She gave me the broad strokes on how to make bistek, but she never gave me specifics, such as how much of an ingredient to use. She always just had to use my instincts and feel it, like she was training me to be some sort of cooking Jedi. Anyway, my feelings are telling me that I need to trim and slice this beef like this. I trimmed off any silver skin and sinewy bits and then sliced it about a half centimeter thick across the grain. Here's a better look. Slicing across the grain shortens the meat fibers, which results in a more tender steak. I'll also be taking an extra precaution in this regard, which I'll get to in a second. First, I have to get the marinade together, and that starts with the juice from both a lime and a lemon, a half cup of soy sauce, and a teaspoon of sugar. Because calamansi isn't readily available around these parts, I'm substituting it with lime, which adds bite, and lemon, which adds sweetness, supplemented, of course, by the sugar. Next comes onions, of course, as well as some additional aromatics in the form of garlic and ginger. My mother did not use garlic and ginger in the recipe, but I think they round out the flavor. I just need to cut all these up. Perfect. I sliced onions into somewhat chunky strips, then gave the garlic and ginger a fine chop. And now it's time to get back to the steak. First, I'll add quite a bit of freshly ground pepper. That should do it. Then in goes the soy sauce, as well as a tablespoon each of lemon and lime juice. I'll give that a bit of a mix before adding the secret ingredient. And that's this: baking soda. I'll add about a half teaspoon. I don't know the exact science, but the baking soda coats the meat fibers and prevents them from clumping together when they cook, which would obviously result in a tough piece of meat otherwise. I'll mix this all again and then let it sit for no more than about 20 minutes so that the baking soda doesn't have a chance to affect the flavor. All right, there's oil in my big purple wok, so that must mean it's time to cook. That begins with the onions, which I'll dump in all at once. Normally for bistek, the onions are only lightly fried, so that they remain bouncy and keep their sharpness. My cousin's bistek, for instance, had onions so lightly cooked that they were practically still raw, and they stung your eyes as you ate. I'm not going to do that. In fact, I'm going to be a little chefy and cook half of these onions the normal way until they're translucent and have softened a bit. Then I'll pull those out. The other half I'll cook longer until they start to caramelize and get a little sweetness, because it's all about adding flavor. And here are the onions after about an extra 10 minutes of frying. They're not super caramelized, but they are quite a bit softer and sweeter than the first batch. I'll pull these out and then get going with the beef. I added more oil to the wok and it's ready for the beef, which I'll pretty much add all at once. This would be a major no-no if I was making a stir fry. A giant mass of meat in a pan would cause condensation, so instead I'd fry the beef in batches so that it didn't steam and give up all its juices to the pan. But giving off juices is exactly what I'm looking for in this case, because those juices are going to be the sauce that'll finish the dish. You can already see those juices starting to bubble off the meat. Here it is after a few minutes. You can see how nice and saucy it's gotten, and the meat's mostly cooked. At this point, I can throw in the ginger and the garlic. If I'd thrown it in earlier, there's a chance it could have burned. Now I can also add the last ingredient, which is the sugar. I'll stir to make sure everything's incorporated. Then it's time to taste. Seems just about right to me. I don't want it to be too salty at this point because I'm still going to reduce the sauce. To do that, I simply remove the meat and turn the heat up to reduce the liquid by about half. It should thicken up slightly on its own, but if you wanted a slightly thicker sauce, you could add a cornstarch slurry, which I've gone through in previous videos. I'm pretty happy with this though. And why wouldn't I be? Because look at that. That's Bistek, Filipino steak and onions. You've got nice, tender strips of beef, and yes, the beef is tender despite being cooked thoroughly thanks to the way it was cut, as well as because of the baking soda. Then you've got firmer, sharper onions, which I put on the bottom, and the sweeter, caramelized onions that I put on top for contrast. The only thing this dish is missing, aside from a big plate of rice on the side, is a generous shower of tangy, salty pan sauce. And it's ready. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, or better yet, a thumbs up and a click on the subscribe button. And if you have any suggestions for future Filipino dishes that I should try making, because honestly I only know so many, feel free to drop it in the comments, along with any questions or opinions. I'll see you next week.